The sun beat down mercilessly on the Arizona territory as Tessa Ashford knelt by the salt river, her fingers working methodically through the tangled fishing nets spread across the rocky bank, knowing that every repair meant another chance to catch the trout that kept her and her younger brother alive in this unforgiving land of 1881. Her father had been a fisherman before consumption took him 6 months ago, leaving Tessa at 22 years old with nothing but his nets, his knowledge, and a 12-year-old brother named Samuel who depended on her entirely. Their mother had died bringing Samuel into the world, so it had always been the three of them against the desert, and now it was just two. The small adobe house they rented on the outskirts of Florence, Arizona sat quiet and empty during the days while Tessa worked the river, and Samuel attended the schoolhouse when he could be spared. The net had torn badly during yesterday's catch, and Tessa's hands moved with practiced efficiency, threading the hemp cord through the gaps and pulling tight. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple braid, and her cotton dress, faded from too many washings, was rolled up at the sleeves. She had learned quickly after her father's death that sympathy from the townspeople lasted only so long before it turned to speculation about what a young, unmarried woman would do to survive. So she kept her head down, sold her fish to the local restaurants and general store, and tried not to think about how precarious their existence had become. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up, shading her eyes against the bright morning sun. A rider approached along the riverbank, his horse picking its way carefully over the stones. As he drew closer, Tessa could make out a tall man in his mid-20s, wearing a dusty brown hat, leather chaps, and a blue shirt that had seen better days. A working cowboy by the looks of him, probably from one of the ranches that sprawled across the territory. He reined in his horse a respectful distance away and touched the brim of his hat. "Morning, miss." Tessa nodded cautiously, her hand stilling on the net. "Morning." The cowboy swung down from his saddle with easy grace, his spurs jingling softly. He had an open, honest face, tanned from years under the sun, with green eyes that seemed kind despite the hardness that the frontier put into every man. "Name's Cole Quinn. I work at the Double Creek Ranch about 5 miles west of here." Tessa Ashford. She did not offer more, waiting to see what he wanted. Men did not usually approach her while she worked unless they wanted something. Cole moved closer, his gaze falling on the net spread before her. "You a fisherwoman?" "I am." Tessa lifted her chin slightly, defensive. Some people thought it strange work for a woman, though they had no problem buying her catch. "I've been watching you work this stretch of river for a few weeks now," Cole said, and Tessa tensed slightly until he continued quickly. "Not in a strange way, I mean. I ride fence line out here regularly, and I've seen you hauling in some impressive catches. The salt river's been good to you." "Good enough," Tessa allowed. "It keeps me and my brother fed." Cole crouched down near the edge of the net, studying the repairs she had made. "Your father taught you well. These are fine knots." Something in Tessa's chest tightened at the mention of her father, but she kept her voice steady. "He was the best fisherman in Florence. I heard tell of a man named Ashford who could pull trout from stone if he had a mind to," Cole said softly. "I'm sorry for your loss. It must be hard, managing this all yourself." Tessa's fingers resumed their work on the net, needing something to do. "I manage." Cole was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his voice held a note of careful consideration. "Miss Ashford, I have a proposition for you, and I hope you'll hear me out before you think I'm being forward." Tessa's hand stopped again, and she looked at him directly, her brown eyes wary. "What kind of proposition?" "An honest one," Cole said quickly. "See, there's a creek that runs through the Double Creek Ranch, the one we're named for. It's spring-fed, cold and clear, and it's absolutely teeming with trout. Beautiful fish, some of the biggest I've ever seen. But we're cattlemen, not fishermen. We don't have the time or the knowledge to work those waters properly. Tessa frowned slightly, not understanding where this was leading. So, Cole met her eyes steadily. So I'm saying, why break your back on the salt river when you could fish my stream instead? The double creek would give you twice the catch with half the effort, and the fish are bigger and fatter than anything you are pulling from here. The ranch owner, Mr. Donnelly, he's been complaining about how thick the trout are getting in some of the deeper pools. Says they need to be thinned out or they will start competing with each other for food. Tessa stared at him, trying to understand what he was actually offering. You want me to fish your ranch creek? I do, Cole said. You'd have free access to the water and you could keep and sell whatever you catch. All I'd ask is that maybe once a week you'd set aside a few fish for the ranch hands. We get tired of beef every single day and fresh trout would be a real treat. It sounded too good to be true, and Tessa's instincts, honed by months of struggling to survive, made her suspicious. Why would you offer this? What do you really want? Cole's expression remained open and sincere. I want exactly what I said. Good fishing for you, occasional fresh fish for us, and maybe the pleasure of your company now and then while you work. It gets lonely out on fence line, and I'd appreciate having someone to talk to when I'm nearby. But that last part is purely optional, he added quickly. If you want to fish in peace, that's fine too. Tessa looked down at the worn net in her hands, then at the river flowing past, then back at Cole Quinn. Every instinct told her to be careful, to protect herself and Samuel from anything that seemed too easy. But she also knew that the salt river had been less generous lately, that the long dry spell had lowered the water levels and scattered the fish. If this man was telling the truth about the ranch creek, it could mean the difference between scraping by and actually having some security. I would need to see it first, she said finally. And I would need to speak with Mr. Donnelly myself to make sure he approves of this arrangement. Cole's face broke into a genuine smile, and Tessa noticed for the first time how it softened his features and made him look younger. That's more than fair. Are you free to ride out there now? I came into town to pick up supplies, but that can wait an hour or two. Tessa hesitated, glancing at the net. She had more repairs to make, but they could wait. This opportunity, if it was real, could not. I'll need to let my brother know where I'm going. Of course, Cole said. Where can we find him? At the schoolhouse, Tessa said, already gathering up her net and tools. It's not far. Cole helped her bundle everything together, his hands quick and capable, and then they walked together back toward Florence with Cole leading his horse. The town was small, just a collection of adobe buildings clustered along a dusty main street, with the Gila River flowing to the south and mountains rising in the distance. It had been established as a military post years ago, then grew into a proper town as ranchers and farmers moved into the area. Now it served as a supply center for the scattered ranches and mines in the region. The schoolhouse was a simple structure near the center of town, and they could hear the sound of children reciting their lessons as they approached. Tessa asked Cole to wait outside while she went in, and she found Samuel sitting in the back row, his attention focused on the slate in front of him. He looked up when she entered, his face brightening immediately. Tessa, is something wrong? Samuel had their father's sandy hair and their mother's blue eyes, according to what their father had always told them. He was small for 12, but wiry and tough, with a quick mind that made Tessa determined to keep him in school despite their financial struggles. Nothing's wrong, Tessa assured him quietly, mindful of the teacher at the front of the room who had paused in her lesson. I'm going out to the Double Creek Ranch to look at a business opportunity. I'll be back before dark. Samuel's eyes widened with curiosity, but he was smart enough not to ask questions in front of the other students. "Be careful," he whispered. "Always," Tessa whispered back, and she pressed a quick kiss to the top of his head before leaving. Cole was waiting patiently outside, and when Tessa emerged, he gestured to his horse. "Have you ridden before?" "Not often," Tessa admitted. They had never been able to afford a horse. "That's all right," Cole said easily. "Bess here is gentle as a lamb. I'll ride up front, and you can sit behind me and hold on. It's not far, maybe 45 minutes at a steady pace." Tessa felt a flutter of nervousness at the idea of sitting so close to a man she barely knew, but she pushed it aside. This was business, nothing more. Cole mounted first, then reached down to help pull her up behind him. Tessa settled herself carefully, acutely aware of how improper this would look to any of the townspeople who might see them. She held onto the back of the saddle at first, but when Bess started moving, Cole glanced back. "You'll be more secure if you hold on to me," he said matter-of-factly. "I promise I'm a gentleman." Tessa swallowed her pride and wrapped her arms lightly around his waist, feeling the solid warmth of him through his shirt. Cole made no comment, just urged Bess into a smooth trot that carried them out of town and west toward the ranch lands. The landscape opened up around them, vast and beautiful in its harsh way. Scrub, brush, and cacti dotted the sandy soil, and the mountains rose in layers of purple and brown in the distance. The sky was an endless blue dome overhead, and hawks circled on the thermals, searching for prey. It was the kind of landscape that could kill a person who did not respect it, but Tessa had lived here all her life and understood its rhythms. As they rode, Cole talked easily, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the ranch. The Double Creek had been established 10 years ago by Patrick Donnelly, an Irishman who had come west to make his fortune in cattle. He ran about 500 head across several thousand acres, with a crew of 15 ranch hands to manage the work. Cole had been with the outfit for 3 years, working his way up from a green hand to a trusted fence rider and occasional foreman when the regular foreman was busy elsewhere. "Mr. Donnelly's fair," Cole said as Bess picked her way around a stand of mesquite. "He works us hard, but he pays on time and feeds us well. He's got a wife, Mary, and 3 daughters, all younger than you. They live in the main house, which is the nicest building you will see for 50 miles in any direction. And he won't mind me fishing his creek." Tessa asked, still not quite believing this was real. "He'll be pleased," Cole assured her. "Mary's been asking him to hire someone to thin out the trout for months now. She likes to cook, but none of us have the skill or time to catch fish properly. We've tried a few times with basic lines, but we're amateurs at best." They crested a low rise, and suddenly the ranch spread out before them. The main house was indeed impressive, a sprawling adobe structure with a red tile roof and a wide veranda that wrapped around 3 sides. Outbuildings clustered nearby: a bunkhouse, a barn, corrals, a smithy, and various sheds. And beyond it all, Tessa could see the gleam of water winding through the property, lined with cottonwood trees that provided precious shade. Cole guided Bess down toward the main house, and as they approached, a man emerged onto the veranda. He was in his 50s, stocky and red-faced, with iron-gray hair and a thick mustache. He watched them approach with curiosity. "Quinn," he called out, "who's that you've got with you?" Cole dismounted and helped Tessa down before turning to face his employer. "Mr. Donnelly, this is Miss Tessa Ashford. She's a fisherwoman from Florence, and I wanted to talk to you about our earlier conversation regarding the creek." Patrick Donnelly's eyebrows rose, and he came down the steps to get a better look at Tessa. She stood straight under his scrutiny, meeting his eyes directly. After a moment, Donnelly laughed, a booming sound that startled a chicken scratching nearby. A fisherwoman. Well, I'll be. I've never heard of such a thing, but these are modern times, I suppose. He looked at Cole. You want to hire her to work the creek? Not hire, Cole corrected. I thought we could offer her free access to fish the Double Creek in exchange for providing the ranch with fresh trout once a week. She keeps and sells the rest of her catch. That way the creek gets thinned out like Mary wants, and we get good eating without having to pay wages. Donnelly stroked his mustache thoughtfully, considering. Can you actually catch fish, miss? Or is Quinn here being optimistic? I can catch fish, Tessa said firmly. My father taught me everything he knew, and I've been fishing the Salt River since I was old enough to hold a net. If your creek is as well stocked as Mr. Quinn says, I can provide you with more trout than you'll know what to do with. Confident, Donnelly said with approval. I like that. Tell you what, Miss Ashford, let's go down to the creek right now and you can show me what you can do. If you can pull out, say, 10 good-sized trout in the next hour using whatever method you prefer, then you've got yourself a deal. Tessa's heart leaped. This was her chance, and she knew she could do it if the creek was even half as good as Cole had described. I'll need my net. It's still on my saddle, Cole said, already moving to retrieve it. The three of them walked down toward the creek, with Donnelly calling back to the house for his wife to come watch. A plump, cheerful woman emerged, followed by 3 girls ranging in age from about 8 to 15. They all trooped down to the water's edge with the excitement of people who did not get much entertainment. The Double Creek was even more beautiful than Tessa had imagined. The water ran clear and cold over a rocky bottom, and she could see fish darting in the shadows of the cottonwoods. The creek was perhaps 20 feet wide at this point, with deep pools alternating with shallow riffles. It was perfect trout habitat. Tessa took her net from Cole and walked along the bank, studying the water with an experienced eye. She could see several good spots where trout would gather. Without hesitation, she waded into the creek, gasping slightly at the coldness of the water, and began to work. Her father had taught her to read water like some people read books, to understand where the fish would be based on current, depth, and cover. She positioned herself upstream of a deep pool, set her net carefully, and then moved down to drive the fish toward it. The technique was called seine netting, and it required patience and understanding of fish behavior. Within 10 minutes, she pulled the net up and found 5 fat trout thrashing in the mesh. The Donnelly family applauded from the bank, and even Cole looked impressed. Tessa worked quickly to remove the fish and place them in the shallow water at the edge. Then she returned to her work. By the time an hour had passed, she had caught 18 trout, all of them between 10 and 14 inches long, beautiful silver fish with pink stripes along their sides. She emerged from the creek with her skirts soaked and clinging to her legs, but with her head held high. Patrick Donnelly was grinning broadly. Miss Ashford, you have yourself a deal. You can fish this creek any day of the week as much as you want. All I ask is that you leave us 6 to 8 fish every Friday for the weekend meals. Does that sound fair? More than fair, Tessa said, trying to keep the relief and joy out of her voice. Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Thank Cole, Donnelly said, clapping the younger man on the shoulder. It was his idea. He's always thinking about ways to improve the ranch, this one. That's why I keep him around. Mary Donnelly came forward with a warm smile. Let me get you a towel and something warm to drink, dear. You must be frozen from that water. Tessa was ushered up to the main house, where she was given a towel and a cup of hot coffee while her skirts dried by the fire. Mary fussed over her in a motherly way that made Tessa's heart ache for her own lost mother, and the 3 Donnelly girls peppered her with questions about fishing and living in Florence, and whether she had ever caught anything besides trout. Cole stood nearby, watching with a quiet satisfaction that made Tessa glance at him several times. When their eyes met, he smiled, and she felt an unexpected warmth spread through her chest. By the time Cole rowed her back to Florence, the sun was beginning to lower toward the western horizon, painting the desert in shades of gold and orange. Tessa sat behind him on Bess again, more relaxed now, and found herself actually leaning against his back as they rowed. "Thank you," she said as they approached the town. "You've given me and Samuel a real chance at something better." Cole glanced back at her, his green eyes warm. "You earned it with your skill. I just pointed you in the right direction." He paused, then added, "I meant what I said earlier about enjoying your company. If you are willing, I'd like to talk with you sometimes while you work. I'd like to get to know you better, Miss Ashford." Tessa's breath caught slightly. She had not let herself think about men or courtship since her father's death. There had been no time, no space in her life for anything but survival. But something about Cole Quinn's steady presence and honest eyes made her want to take a risk. "I think I'd like that too," she said softly. "And you can call me Tessa." "Tessa," Cole repeated, and she liked the way her name sounded in his mouth. "Then you should call me Cole." He left her at the edge of town, helping her down from Bess and handing her the bundle of fish she had caught. "Will you come out to the ranch tomorrow?" "I will," Tessa promised. "Early, before the sun gets too hot." "I'll watch for you," Cole said, and then he was riding away, leaving Tessa standing in the street with a bundle of fish and a feeling she had not experienced in a very long time: hope. Samuel was waiting for her at their small house, practically bouncing with curiosity. Over a dinner of fried trout and cornbread, Tessa told him everything about the ranch, the creek, and the deal she had made. Samuel listened with wide eyes, and when she finished, he let out a whoop of joy. "Does this mean we will have more money? Does this mean I can stay in school?" "It means both those things," Tessa said, smiling at his enthusiasm. "And maybe more. If I can catch as many fish as I think I can, we might even be able to save a little." That night, as Tessa lay in bed, she thought about Cole Quinn and the kindness he had shown her. She thought about the way he smiled, the way he spoke to her like an equal, the way he seemed genuinely interested in her success. It had been so long since anyone had looked at her as anything other than a burden or an oddity. Cole looked at her like she was someone worth knowing. The next morning, Tessa woke before dawn and made the long walk out to the Double Creek Ranch, carrying her nets and a canvas bag for her catch. The desert was cool in the pre-dawn darkness, and she saw a coyote watching her from a distance before it melted away into the shadows. She reached the ranch just as the sun was breaking over the mountains, turning the sky shades of pink and orange. Cole was waiting near the creek, sitting on a fallen log with 2 tin cups and a pot of coffee warming over a small fire. "Morning," he said, standing as she approached. "I thought you might appreciate something hot before you start working." Tessa accepted the coffee gratefully, wrapping her cold hands around the warm cup. They sat together on the log, watching the light spread across the landscape, and talked about small things. The weather, the wildlife, the way the desert changed with the seasons. When Tessa finally started working, Cole stayed nearby, tending to ranch business but always within sight. He mended a section of fence, checked the water level in a cattle trough, and shoed one of the horses, but every so often he would look over and watch her work. Tessa found his presence comforting rather than intrusive, and during her breaks, they would talk more. Over the following weeks, a pattern developed. Tessa would come to the ranch early each morning, fish until mid-afternoon when the sun became too intense, and then walk back to Florence with her catch. She would sell the fish to the general store and the local restaurant, keeping enough for herself and Samuel, and every Friday she would leave a bucket of fresh trout at the ranch house, and every day Cole found reasons to be near the creek. Sometimes he brought his lunch and they ate together. Sometimes he would help her haul the heavier catches up to the bank. Sometimes they would just talk, sharing stories about their lives. Tessa learned that Cole had grown up in Texas, the son of a failed farmer who had drunk himself to death after a series of bad harvests. Cole had left home at 16 and worked his way west, taking jobs where he could find them until he landed at the Double Creek. He was 26 now, and he had dreams of someday owning his own small spread. Nothing fancy, just enough land to run a modest herd and live independently. Cole learned that Tessa had never known her mother, that her father had been a gentle man who loved books as much as fishing, that Samuel was the most important person in her world. He learned that she was smart and funny, that she had a gift for reading the natural world, that she could be stubborn as a mule when she believed in something. The attraction between them grew slowly but steadily, built on genuine friendship and respect. Cole never pushed, never made Tessa feel uncomfortable, but she could see the way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching. And she found herself thinking about him during the evenings, wondering what he was doing, missing his voice. It was Mary Donnelly who first commented on it, about 6 weeks after Tessa had started fishing the creek. Tessa had brought the weekly bucket of fish up to the house, and Mary invited her in for lemonade as she often did. "That Cole Quinn is a good man," Mary said as they sat in her comfortable kitchen. "Honest, hardworking, respectful, the kind of man who will make some woman very happy someday." Tessa felt her cheeks warm. "I'm sure he will." Mary gave her a knowing look. "He's out by that creek an awful lot for a man who's supposed to be riding fence line all over the property." "He has work to do near there," Tessa said, not quite meeting Mary's eyes. "He does," Mary agreed, "but he's never spent quite so much time on that particular section before you arrived." She reached across the table and patted Tessa's hand. "I'm not teasing you, dear. I'm saying that if you have feelings for him, you should know that he's the real thing. Patrick and I have watched him for 3 years now, and we've never seen him act dishonorably or carelessly. If Cole Quinn courts a woman, it's because he means it." Tessa looked up, meeting Mary's warm eyes. "I do have feelings for him," she admitted quietly, "but I'm afraid. I can't afford to make mistakes, not with Samuel depending on me, and I don't know if I'm ready to trust someone with my heart." "Nobody's ever ready," Mary said wisely. "We just take the leap and hope the other person catches us. But from what I've seen, Cole would catch you, Tessa. I truly believe that." That afternoon, as Tessa was packing up her gear to head home, Cole approached her with a somewhat nervous expression on his usually calm face. "Tessa, I was wondering if maybe you'd like to stay for supper one evening this week. There's a dance in Florence on Saturday night, and I thought maybe you would accompany me. If you want to, I mean. No pressure." Tessa's heart began to beat faster. This was different from their friendly conversations by the creek. This was Cole declaring his intentions, making his interest clear. She could say no, could protect herself and Samuel from any potential complication, or she could say yes, could take the risk that Mary Donnelly had talked about. "I would like that," Tessa heard herself say. "But Samuel would need to come too. I can't leave him alone in the evenings." "Of course," Cole said immediately. "I'd like to get to know your brother better anyway. How about Wednesday for supper? Mary mentioned she's making a roast, and there's always plenty." "Wednesday would be good," Tessa agreed, and the smile that broke across Cole's face made her stomach flutter. That evening, Tessa told Samuel about the invitation, and he was thrilled. "I like Cole," he said simply. "He treats you good, Tessa. He treats you like you are important." The words hit Tessa hard because Samuel was right. Cole did treat her like she was important, like her thoughts and feelings mattered, like she was more than just a struggling fisherwoman trying to survive. He treated her like she was worth something. Wednesday evening arrived, and Tessa put on her best dress, a simple green cotton that she had made herself 2 years ago. It was not fancy, but it was clean and mended, and it brought out the color of her eyes. She braided her hair carefully and pinched her cheeks for color, and Samuel teased her gently about primping. They walked out to the ranch together in the cooling evening air, and Cole met them halfway, riding Bess and leading a gentle mare for them to ride. He had clearly taken time with his own appearance too, wearing a clean white shirt and a leather vest, with his hair combed back and his face freshly shaved. "You look beautiful," he said to Tessa, and the sincerity in his voice made her blush. Supper at the ranch house was warm and boisterous, with the Donnelly girls chattering about school and town gossip while Patrick held forth on the cattle business. Samuel fit right in, laughing at Patrick's jokes and answering Mary's gentle questions about his studies. Cole sat next to Tessa, close enough that their arms brushed occasionally, and each touch sent a little spark through her. After supper, Cole walked them partway back to Florence, leading the horses and talking easily with Samuel about ranching and horses. When they reached the edge of town, he helped Samuel onto the mare and sent him ahead, asking for a moment alone with Tessa. In the gathering darkness, with crickets singing in the brush and stars beginning to appear overhead, Cole took Tessa's hand gently in his. "I want to be clear about my intentions," he said quietly. "I'm not the kind of man who plays games or toys with a woman's feelings. I like you, Tessa, more than like you. I think about you all the time, and I want to see where this could go between us. But I understand if you need time, or if you are not interested. I just needed you to know where I stand." Tessa looked up at him, at his honest face and kind eyes, and felt something inside her chest crack open. "I'm interested," she whispered. "I'm scared, but I'm interested." Cole's hand tightened around hers. "I'm scared too," he admitted, "but I think you are worth being scared for." He leaned down slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and kissed her softly. It was Tessa's first real kiss, and it was everything she had read about in the novels her father had sometimes brought home from town, sweet and warm and full of promise. When they parted, she was breathless. "Saturday," Cole said softly. "The dance." "I'll be the proudest man in Florence if you are on my arm." "Saturday," Tessa agreed, and she was smiling as she walked home to where Samuel was waiting. The next few days passed in a happy blur. Tessa fished the creek with more energy than ever, her catches growing larger as she learned every pool and current of the double creek. Cole continued to find reasons to be near her, and now their interactions were flavored with the sweetness of acknowledged affection. He held her hand when they walked, kissed her cheek when he thought no one was looking, and told her stories that made her laugh until her sides hurt. Saturday evening arrived with perfect weather, warm but not hot, with a light breeze that kept the dust down. The dance was being held in the largest building in Florence, a converted warehouse that served as a community center for gatherings and celebrations. By the time Tessa, Cole, and Samuel arrived, the place was already crowded with ranch families, townspeople, and even some of the soldiers from the nearby military post. Tessa had borrowed a nicer dress from Mary Donnelly, a blue calico with lace at the collar that fit her reasonably well. Mary had also helped her arrange her hair in a more elaborate style, with curls framing her face. Cole had stared at her when he picked her up, speechless for a full minute, before finally managing to say, "You are the most beautiful woman I've ever seen." Now, as they entered the dance hall with its paper lanterns and energetic fiddle music, Tessa felt nervous but excited. She had not been to a dance since before her father got sick, and even then she had always been too shy to dance much. But Cole took her hand and led her onto the floor with confidence, and soon they were spinning through a reel with the other couples. Cole was a surprisingly good dancer, light on his feet despite his size, and he guided Tessa through the steps with ease. Between dances, they drank lemonade and talked with other people from the ranch and town. Samuel had found a group of boys his age and was off causing harmless mischief in the corners of the hall. As the evening wore on and the music slowed, Cole pulled Tessa close for a waltz. With her hand in his and his arm around her waist, they moved together in a way that felt natural and right. Tessa rested her head against Cole's shoulder and closed her eyes, letting herself simply feel the moment, the warmth of his body, the strength of his arms, the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. "I could dance with you forever," Cole murmured into her hair. "I wish you could," Tessa whispered back, and she meant it. But the evening could not last forever, and eventually they collected a tired but happy Samuel and began the walk back to town. Cole had arranged to borrow a wagon, so Samuel curled up in the back and promptly fell asleep, while Cole and Tessa sat on the front bench, his arm around her shoulders and her head on his chest. At the door of Tessa's small house, Cole kissed her again, longer and deeper this time, and Tessa felt her entire body respond to him. When they parted, both breathing hard, Cole pressed his forehead to hers. "I'm falling in love with you," he said roughly. "I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a couple months, but I can't help it. You are everything I never knew I was looking for." Tessa's eyes filled with tears, happy tears this time. "I'm falling in love with you too," she admitted. "It terrifies me, but I can't seem to stop." "Then don't stop," Cole said. "Just fall and I'll catch you, I promise." Over the following months, Cole and Tessa's courtship deepened and grew. He was a constant presence in her life, helping her with heavy work, bringing her small gifts, spending time with Samuel, and becoming a figure the boy looked up to and trusted. The people of Florence and the ranch hands at Double Creek began referring to them as a couple, and no one seemed surprised when Cole started talking about his future plans as "our plans" instead of "my plans." But the path of true love, as Tessa's father had often said while reading aloud from his books, never did run smooth. The trouble started in late September, 4 months after their first meeting. Tessa was fishing the creek as usual when she heard raised voices from the direction of the ranch house. Concerned, she pulled in her net and hurried up the bank, arriving to find Cole and Patrick Donnelly in heated discussion with a well-dressed stranger and 2 rough-looking men. "I don't care what you think you found," Patrick was saying angrily. "This is my land, legally purchased and registered with the territorial government." The well-dressed stranger, a thin man with cold eyes and an expensive suit that looked absurd in the ranch setting, smiled without warmth. "Mr. Donnelly, I represent the Arizona Mining Corporation, and our surveys show that there is a significant copper deposit running under your property, including the area around what you call the Double Creek. We're prepared to make you a very generous offer to purchase the land." "It's not for sale," Patrick said flatly. "Everything's for sale at the right price," the stranger said. "And we're willing to pay well above market value. Think about it, Mr. Donnelly. You could retire comfortable, move your family somewhere more civilized." "My family is plenty civilized right here," Patrick shot back. "And I said no. Now get off my land." The stranger's smile disappeared. "That's unfortunate. You should know that the Arizona Mining Corporation has friends in the territorial government and significant legal resources. If we have to acquire this land through other means, we will. It would be much easier for everyone if you simply accepted our offer." Cole stepped forward, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. "You heard Mr. Donnelly. Time to leave." The 2 rough men with the stranger moved their hands toward their own weapons, and for a moment Tessa thought violence would erupt right there, but the stranger held up a hand, stopping his men. "We'll be back," he said coolly. "With lawyers, with surveyors, and with whatever legal authority we need. You're on the wrong side of progress, Mr. Donnelly." The three men mounted their horses and rode away, leaving an angry silence in their wake. Patrick cursed creatively for a full minute while Mary tried to calm him down. Cole noticed Tessa standing nearby and came to her immediately. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I'm fine," Tessa said. "But what was that about? Can they really take the ranch?" Cole's expression was grim. "I don't know. Mining companies have a lot of power in the territory, and they have been known to use questionable methods to get what they want. We need to look at the ranch's deeds and titles, make sure everything is in order." Over the next few weeks, the situation deteriorated. The mining company sent lawyers who found technicalities in the ranch's paperwork, claiming that an old Spanish land grant superseded Patrick's purchase. They brought surveyors who set up equipment on ranch property, despite being ordered off. They even approached individual ranch hands, offering them money to leave Patrick's employment and come work for the mining operation instead. Patrick hired his own lawyer, a smart man from Phoenix who assured them the ranch's claim was solid. But the legal battles were expensive and time-consuming, and the stress was taking a visible toll on the Donnelly family. Through it all, Cole stood firm beside Patrick, working extra hours, helping to keep the ranch running smoothly despite the distractions. And Tessa continued to fish the creek, determined not to let the mining company's threats interrupt her work or her life. One afternoon in early October, Tessa was working a particularly productive pool when she noticed something strange. The water level had dropped significantly overnight, and there was an odd taste to it when she absently licked her lips after splashing her face. She climbed out of the creek and walked upstream, following the water back toward its source in the hills. What she found made her stomach sink. Someone had deliberately diverted part of the spring that fed the creek, cutting the water flow by more than half. The diversion channel was crude but effective, sending the water off into a gully where it would eventually sink into the sand and be lost. Tessa ran back to the ranch house, finding Cole and Patrick in the barn. "The creek," she gasped, out of breath from running. "Someone's damming it up, diverting the water." The men exchanged dark looks and immediately saddled horses. Tessa rode behind Cole and they galloped up into the hills. When they reached the diversion point, they found fresh boot prints and shovel marks. This had been done recently, probably during the night. "The mining company," Patrick said grimly. "They are trying to force me out by destroying the ranch's water supply. Without the double creek, the cattle will have to rely entirely on the wells, and we don't have enough well water to sustain the herd through summer." Cole was already dismounting, gathering rocks and branches. "We can fix this, at least temporarily, but they will just come back and do it again." They worked together to redirect the spring back into its natural channel, and by late afternoon the creek was flowing properly again. But Tessa could see the worry in Cole's eyes, and she knew he was thinking the same thing she was. This was only the beginning. That night, Patrick called a meeting of all the ranch hands. In the bunkhouse, lit by lanterns and smelling of tobacco and leather, he laid out the situation honestly. "The mining company is playing dirty," he said. "They want this land and they don't care what they have to do to get it. I'm asking you men to stay loyal to the Double Creek, but I'm not ordering it. If any of you want to take your pay and move on before things get worse, I'll understand." There was a moment of silence, and then Cole stood up. "I'm staying," he said firmly. "I've got reasons to keep this ranch running." He glanced at Tessa, who was standing near the door, and she felt warmth spread through her chest despite the seriousness of the situation. One by one, the other ranch hands voiced their agreement. They were staying. Patrick's voice was rough with emotion as he thanked them. Over the next 2 weeks, the harassment escalated. Fences were cut, allowing cattle to wander. Equipment mysteriously broke or went missing. The spring was diverted twice more, each time requiring hours of work to fix. And through it all, the mining company's lawyers kept up their legal pressure, filing motions and demanding hearings. Tessa wanted to help, but she did not know how. She was just a fisherwoman with no money or influence. But then she remembered something her father had told her years ago, about a friend of his who worked for a newspaper in Phoenix. The territorial papers had power, her father had said, the power to expose wrongdoing and turn public opinion. Tessa talked to Cole about her idea, and he brought it to Patrick. 2 days later, Tessa found herself on a stagecoach to Phoenix, carrying a detailed account of the mining company's harassment and copies of all the ranch's legal documents. Cole had wanted to come with her, but he was needed at the ranch to help with the increased security patrols they had implemented. Phoenix was overwhelming to someone who had spent her whole life in small towns and open spaces. The streets were crowded and noisy, and the buildings seemed impossibly tall. But Tessa found the newspaper office her father had mentioned, and she asked for the editor, a man named Robert Ashford, no relation but someone who her father had known years ago. Robert Ashford was a grizzled man in his 60s, with ink-stained fingers and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles. He listened to Tessa's story with growing interest, asking pointed questions and taking notes. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. The Arizona Mining Corporation has been pulling this kind of thing all over the territory, he said. Intimidation, legal tricks, outright violence in some cases. The problem is that they have powerful friends, and most of their victims are too scared or poor to fight back. But if what you are telling me is accurate, this might be the story we can use to expose them. It's all accurate, Tessa assured him. I can provide witnesses, documents, everything you need. Robert smiled. Then we will run it. Front page next week's edition. And I'll make sure copies get sent to every paper in the territory and to the territorial governor's office. The Arizona Mining Corporation is about to discover that sunlight is a powerful disinfectant. Tessa returned to Florence 2 days later, exhausted but hopeful. Cole met her at the stage depot and swept her into his arms, holding her like he had not seen her in months rather than just a few days. I missed you, he said against her hair. Don't leave me again. I won't, Tessa promised. Not if I can help it. The newspaper article ran the following Tuesday, and it was everything Tessa had hoped for. Robert Ashford had done his research, documenting not only the harassment at the Double Creek Ranch, but also similar incidents at 3 other properties the mining company had targeted. The article painted a damning picture of corporate bullying and possible corruption in the Territorial Land Office. The response was immediate and dramatic. Other papers picked up the story. Citizens groups in Phoenix and Tucson began demanding investigations. And most importantly, the territorial governor's office announced that it would be reviewing the mining company's land claims and business practices. Within a week, the harassment at the ranch stopped. The mining company's lawyers quietly withdrew their legal challenges. The well-dressed stranger and his rough companions were never seen again. Patrick Donnelly received a formal letter from the Arizona Mining Corporation, stating that they had decided not to pursue acquisition of his property after all. The ranch erupted in celebration. Patrick threw a party for all the hands and their families, with beef roasting over open fires and whiskey flowing freely. Tessa was treated as a hero, the person whose quick thinking had saved the ranch. She was embarrassed by the attention, but Cole was bursting with pride. "You saved us," he kept saying. "You saw the solution when none of the rest of us could." That night, after the party had wound down and most people had drifted off to bed, Cole and Tessa walked down to the creek together. The water flowed peacefully under the moonlight, and the cottonwoods rustled in the gentle breeze. Cole took both of Tessa's hands in his and looked into her eyes. "Marry me," he said simply. "I know we've only been courting for 6 months, and I know things have been crazy lately, but I love you, Tessa. I want to spend my life with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to build a future with you." Tessa's heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "What about Samuel?" "Samuel comes with you," Cole said immediately. "He's family. I would never ask you to choose between him and me. We'll raise him together, and when he's grown and ready to make his own way, we'll help him do that too." Tears were streaming down Tessa's face now. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Cole let out a whoop of joy and swept her up, spinning her around until they were both dizzy and laughing. Then he kissed her, deep and passionate, a kiss that promised all the tomorrows they would share together. They were married 6 weeks later, in December of 1881, in a simple ceremony at the Florence church. Samuel stood as Tessa's witness, looking proud and grown up in a new suit that Patrick Donnelly had purchased for him. Mary Donnelly cried happy tears and fussed over Tessa's borrowed wedding dress. And Patrick himself walked Tessa down the aisle, since she had no father to do the honor. Cole had never looked more handsome than he did that day, standing at the altar in his best clothes with his hair slicked back and his eyes shining with love. When the preacher asked if he took Tessa to be his wife, his "I do" rang through the church with absolute certainty. The Donnellys had offered them the use of a small cottage on the ranch property, a 2-room structure that had previously been used for storage. Cole and several of the other hands had spent weeks fixing it up, repairing the roof, whitewashing the walls, building furniture. It was not much, but it was theirs, and when Cole carried Tessa over the threshold on their wedding night, she thought it was the most beautiful home in the world. Samuel moved into the ranch bunkhouse, where the other hands treated him like a little brother and taught him the basics of ranch work. He still went to school in Florence when he could, but now he was learning practical skills too, and he thrived under the attention and guidance of the men. Tessa continued to fish the creek through that winter and into the spring, though now she fished as much for pleasure as for income. Cole had been promoted to foreman of the Double Creek Ranch after the previous foreman decided to retire, and the increase in his wages meant they had more financial security than Tessa had ever known. She still sold her fish to the general store and restaurant, but the desperate edge was gone from the work. Now it was simply what she loved to do. Their first year of marriage was full of joy and discovery. They learned each other's habits and rhythms, how to compromise and communicate, how to support each other through difficulties. Cole was patient and tender with Tessa, teaching her about physical love with a gentleness that made her trust him completely. And Tessa brought warmth and laughter into Cole's life, teaching him that home was not a place but a person. By summer of 1882, Tessa realized she was pregnant. The morning sickness had started subtly, but when she missed her monthly courses twice in a row, she knew. She told Cole one evening as they sat on the small porch of their cottage, watching the sun set over the mountains. "I'm going to have a baby," she said simply, and then held her breath, waiting for his reaction. Cole's face went through a series of expressions: surprise, confusion, understanding, and then pure radiant joy. He pulled her into his arms carefully, as if she had suddenly become fragile. "A baby," he repeated, his voice full of wonder. "We're going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Tessa asked, needing to hear it. Happy doesn't begin to cover it, Cole said, pulling back to look at her face. Tessa, you've given me everything. A home, a family, love, and now a child. I'm the luckiest man alive. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the hot Arizona summer and into the cooler fall. Mary Donnelly appointed herself Tessa's guardian angel, providing advice and hand-me-down baby clothes from her own daughter's infancies. The ranch hands treated Tessa like precious china, insisting she rest more and work less. And Cole was almost comically protective, worrying over every twinge and discomfort. In late February of 1883, Tessa went into labor. Mary Donnelly was with her, along with a midwife from Florence. Cole paced outside the cottage, wearing a path in the dirt, while Samuel sat on the porch steps looking nervous. The labor was long and difficult, lasting nearly 18 hours. There were moments when Tessa thought she could not bear another contraction, when the pain was so intense she wanted to give up. But Mary held her hand and the midwife encouraged her, and she thought of Cole outside waiting for her, and she found the strength to continue. Finally, in the early hours of February 24, 1883, Tessa and Cole's son was born. He was a healthy baby with strong lungs, making his presence known with loud cries that brought Cole running into the cottage. Tessa was exhausted but elated as the midwife placed the cleaned and swaddled baby in her arms. Cole knelt beside the bed, staring at his son with an expression of absolute awe. "He's perfect," Cole whispered. "He's absolutely perfect. What should we name him?" Tessa asked, stroking the baby's soft, dark hair. Cole thought for a moment. "How about Thomas, after your father, Thomas Quinn?" Tessa's eyes filled with tears. Her father's name had been William Thomas Ashford, and he had always gone by Thomas. "Thomas Quinn," she repeated. "I love it." The baby's arrival transformed the cottage into a home filled with new sounds and rhythms. Tessa discovered that she loved motherhood, despite the exhaustion and the constant demands. Cole proved to be a devoted father, waking in the night to help with feedings, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours simply holding his son and marveling at him. Samuel, now 14 and growing into a confident young man, was an enthusiastic uncle. He helped with Thomas whenever he could, his gangly teenage awkwardness melting away when he held the baby. Tessa watched the two of them together and felt her heart expand with love for her family. As Thomas grew from infant to toddler, the Quinn household grew in other ways too. Cole's dream of owning his own land was realized when Patrick Donnelly offered to sell him 100 acres at the far edge of the ranch property, including a section of the Double Creek. The price was more than fair, practically a gift, and Cole and Tessa saved every penny they could to make the payments. By the time Thomas was 3 years old, in 1886, they owned the land outright. Cole and Samuel, now 17 and a skilled ranch hand in his own right, spent months building a proper house on the property. It was not fancy, but it was solid. 3 bedrooms, a real kitchen, a parlor with a fireplace, and a wide porch that looked out over the creek. Tessa planted a garden and fruit trees. Cole built corrals and barns. They purchased a small herd of cattle and began building their own operation, modest but sustainable. On weekends, Samuel would come over from the main ranch where he still worked, and they would all have Sunday dinner together, a tradition that reminded Tessa of her childhood with her father. In 1887, their second child was born, a daughter they named Catherine Rose. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's green eyes, and she was as sweet-tempered as Thomas was mischievous. Cole doted on his little girl, and Tessa teased him gently about being wrapped around his daughter's tiny finger. The years passed in a happy blur of children growing, cattle thriving, and love deepening. Thomas proved to be a natural with animals, and by the time he was 8 he could rope and ride almost as well as his father. Catherine was quieter, more thoughtful, and she loved to sit by the creek with her mother, watching Tessa fish and asking endless questions about the natural world. In 1891, Samuel married a sweet schoolteacher from Florence named Elizabeth, and they built their own small house on a portion of the Quinn land that Cole and Tessa gifted them. Samuel continued to work the ranch, now as an equal partner with Cole in the growing operation. The two men ran Quinn Ranch together, building it into one of the most respected small ranches in the territory. Tessa continued to fish, though now it was more hobby than necessity. She taught both Thomas and Catherine how to read the water, how to mend nets, how to respect the river that had saved their family. The Double Creek remained as generous as ever, its waters cold and clear, its trout fat and plentiful. On warm summer evenings, Tessa and Cole would sit on their porch after the children were asleep, holding hands and watching the stars come out. They would talk about the day's events, make plans for the future, or sometimes just sit in comfortable silence. "You ever think about that day?" Cole asked one such evening in the summer of 1892. "When I found you mending nets by the river," Tessa smiled, remembering. "I think about it often. I was so suspicious of you, so certain there had to be a catch." "And was there?" Cole asked, pulling her closer against his side. "The biggest catch of my life," Tessa said, tilting her face up to kiss him. "I caught you, and I've never regretted it for a moment." "Fish my stream instead," Cole murmured, echoing those first words he had said to her all those years ago. "Best proposal I ever made." "It wasn't exactly a proposal," Tessa laughed. "More like a business arrangement." "That turned into the greatest love story I've ever been part of," Cole finished, kissing her forehead. "I love you, Tessa Quinn. I loved you then, I love you now, and I'll love you for the rest of my days." "And I love you," Tessa whispered back, settling into his embrace and feeling utterly content. In 1895, their third child was born, another son they named Daniel Patrick, after Patrick Donnelly, who had passed away peacefully the previous winter. Mary Donnelly was still going strong, now a grandmother many times over through her own daughter's marriages, and she welcomed little Daniel into the world with the same joy and expertise she had brought to all the Quinn children's births. Thomas was 12 now, already showing signs of becoming as tall and strong as his father. Catherine was 8, smart and gentle and beloved by everyone who met her. And Samuel and Elizabeth had 2 children of their own, making the extended family grow larger every year. The Quinn Ranch prospered as Arizona territory grew and changed around them. There were rumors that Arizona might soon become a state, that the wild frontier days were ending and civilization was taking hold. Tessa was not sure how she felt about that. Part of her mourned the passing of the old ways, while another part was grateful for the increased stability and safety. But some things never changed. The Double Creek still flowed clear and cold through their land. The desert still bloomed spectacular colors after the rare rains. The mountains still stood eternal on the horizon. And Cole still looked at Tessa with the same love and devotion he had shown that first day by the Salt River. As the century drew to a close, Tessa sometimes found herself down by the creek in the early morning, watching the water flow past and thinking about the journey that had brought her here. From a desperate young woman trying to survive to a secure wife and mother with a family and home she loved, the transformation felt almost miraculous. She thought about her father often, wishing he could have known Cole, could have seen his grandchildren, could have witnessed how well his daughter had done. But she liked to think he knew somehow, that he was proud of her, that he understood she had honored his memory by passing on his skills and knowledge to the next generation. In 1899, Thomas announced that he was courting a girl from Florence, the daughter of the general store owner. Cole and Tessa gave their blessing, recognizing the same look in their son's eyes that they had once seen in each other's. Catherine had developed a passion for teaching, like her Aunt Elizabeth, and was planning to attend the new normal school that had opened in Phoenix to become certified as a teacher. By the turn of the century in 1900, the Quinn Ranch was firmly established as a successful operation. They ran a modest but productive herd, supplied fresh fish to restaurants throughout the region, and had built a reputation for quality and reliability. More importantly, they had built a family legacy of love, hard work, and integrity. One evening in the spring of 1901, 20 years after they had first met, Cole and Tessa took a walk down to the creek together. It had become their favorite time of day, after the work was done, and before the desert night descended, when the light turned everything golden and the air was soft and cool. They stood hand in hand at the edge of the water, watching it flow past just as it had on that first morning when Cole had proposed his unusual business arrangement. So much had changed since then, yet so much remained the same. 20 years, Cole said wonderingly. Has it really been 20 years? 20 years since you found me mending nets and said those magic words, Tessa agreed, leaning into his solid warmth. Fish my stream instead, Cole quoted, smiling at the memory. I thought I was being clever, offering you better fishing. I had no idea I was offering you my heart. But you were, Tessa said softly. From that very first moment you were offering me everything. A chance at something better, a partnership, respect, and eventually love. You changed my life, Cole Quinn. We changed each other's lives, Cole corrected. You taught me what home really means. You gave me a family, a purpose beyond just working and existing. You made me into the man I always wanted to be. Tessa turned to face him fully, reaching up to cup his face in her hands. At 43, he had lines around his eyes and silver threading through his dark hair, but to her, he was as handsome as the day they met. We built this together, she said. Everything we have, everything we are, we built it side by side. That's what makes it so precious. Cole pulled her close, kissing her with the passion and tenderness that had never faded through 2 decades of marriage. When they parted, both a little breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. Here's to the next 20 years, he murmured. And the 20 after that, and however many more were granted. I want them all with you, Tessa. Every single one. You'll have them, Tessa promised. All of them and more. I'm yours, Cole, for as long as we both shall live. They stood together in the gathering dusk, the creek flowing past their feet and the first stars beginning to appear overhead. From the house in the distance, they could hear the sounds of their children laughing and talking. Daniel's high childish voice, Catherine's gentle tones, and even Thomas visiting with his new fiancée. It was a symphony of life and love, built on the foundation of 2 people who had taken a chance on each other beside an Arizona river in the summer of 1881. A fisherwoman mending nets and a cowboy with a proposition that changed everything. As they walked back toward the warmth and light of home, hand in hand as they had been for 20 years, Tessa sent up a silent prayer of gratitude. For the creek that had sustained them, for the courage to take risks, for the love that had grown from such simple beginnings into something vast and enduring. The Wild West was fading, giving way to a new century with new ways. But the values that had built the Quinn Ranch would endure. Hard work, integrity, family, and above all, love. Those were the things that mattered, the things that would carry them through whatever challenges the future might bring. And as Cole opened the door to their home and the lights spilled out to welcome them, as their children called out greetings and Daniel ran to hug his parents, Tessa knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. She had been mending nets by the river to sell trout, trying to survive in a harsh and unforgiving land. A cowboy had said to fish his stream instead, and in doing so had offered her a chance at a life beyond mere survival. She had taken that chance, and it had led her to love, family, security, and happiness beyond anything she had ever dreamed possible. The creek still flowed. The cattle still grazed. The children still grew. And through it all, Cole and Tessa Quinn stood together, partners in every sense of the word, building a legacy that would outlast them both. Years continued to pass in peaceful succession. In 1902, Thomas married his sweetheart Mary Catherine in a beautiful ceremony at the Florence Church, the same church where his parents had wed 21 years earlier. The young couple built their own home on Quinland, continuing the tradition of families staying close. Within a year, they welcomed Cole and Tessa's first grandchild, a robust boy they named William Thomas Quinn, honoring both his great-grandfather and his father. Catherine completed her teaching certification in 1904 and returned to Florence to teach at the same schoolhouse Samuel had attended as a boy. She was beloved by her students and respected by their parents, known for her patience and creativity. She also caught the eye of a young doctor who had recently opened a practice in Florence, a kind man from Boston named Dr. James Mitchell, who had come west seeking adventure and found love instead. Daniel grew into a thoughtful child who loved books as much as ranching, often found reading on the porch when he was supposed to be doing chores. Cole and Tessa encouraged his education, remembering how Tessa's father had valued learning. They made sure Daniel had access to books and arranged for him to attend the better school in Phoenix when he was old enough. Samuel and Elizabeth's family grew as well, with 4 children eventually filling their house with noise and laughter. The 2 branches of the family remained close, gathering every Sunday for dinner at the main Quinn house, a tradition that Cole and Tessa treasured. In 1906, Catherine married Dr. James Mitchell in a ceremony that brought together the old frontier families and the new arrivals who were making Arizona their home. It was a blending of worlds, and Cole and Tessa watched with satisfaction as their daughter stood beside a good man who clearly adored her. The ranch continued to prosper under Cole and Samuel's joint management. They had expanded their herd, improved their breeding stock, and established contracts with buyers as far away as California. Tessa's fishing operation had also grown, with Thomas now helping to manage it alongside his ranching duties. They employed several men to work the creek full-time, using the techniques Tessa had perfected over the years. In 1907, Daniel, at 12 years old, announced that he wanted to become a lawyer. It was an unusual ambition for a ranch boy, but Cole and Tessa supported him wholeheartedly. They began putting aside money for his education, determined that their youngest son would have every opportunity to follow his dreams. The years of 1908 and 1909 brought more grandchildren. Thomas and Mary Catherine had 3 more children, 2 girls and another boy. Catherine and James had twin daughters who were the delight of the entire family. Samuel and Elizabeth's youngest was born in the summer of 1909, completing their family of 6 children. The Quinn family gatherings grew larger and more boisterous with each passing year. The main house and its expanded porch could barely contain everyone during Sunday dinners. Children ran wild in the yard while the adults talked and laughed. Food covered every available surface. It was chaos and noise and perfect love. As Arizona Territory finally achieved statehood in February of 1912, Cole and Tessa stood on their porch watching the celebration fireworks in the distance. They were in their 50s now, their children grown or nearly so, their grandchildren numerous. The wild frontier they had known was largely tamed, replaced by towns and roads and modern conveniences. "You miss it?" Tessa asked Cole as they watched the lights burst across the night sky. "The old days, when everything was rougher and wilder." Cole considered the question seriously. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but mostly I'm grateful for what we have now. Our family is safe and healthy. We don't have to worry about outlaws or Indian raids or mining companies trying to steal our land. Progress has been good to us." "It has," Tessa agreed. "Though I'm glad we got to experience some of the old ways too. It made us stronger, I think." "It definitely made us stronger," Cole said, pulling her close, "and brought us together. I like to think that would have happened no matter when or where we lived, but I'm glad it happened here in this place in those times. It shaped who we are." In 1913, Daniel left for university in California, the first member of either family to pursue higher education. It was bittersweet for Cole and Tessa to see their youngest leave, but they were immensely proud of his ambition and intelligence. He promised to write weekly, and he kept that promise faithfully. With Daniel away at school, Cole and Tessa found themselves with more time alone together than they had had in years. It was a new phase of their marriage, and they discovered they enjoyed it immensely. They took long rides through their property, stayed up late talking by the fire, made love with the freedom of people who no longer had to worry about children interrupting. They also began to travel modestly, taking the train to Phoenix and once even to San Francisco, marveling at how the world had changed and grown. But they always returned to the ranch with relief, glad to be back on their own land beside their beloved creek. The World War that began in Europe in 1914 seemed impossibly far away from their Arizona ranch, but its effects were eventually felt even there. Prices for beef rose as demand increased. Young men from Florence and the surrounding ranches enlisted, including two of Samuel's older sons. Cole and Tessa prayed daily for their nephew's safety and followed the war news with increasing concern. Both young men returned safely when the war ended in 1918, though changed by what they had experienced. The family welcomed them home with tears and celebration, grateful that their boys had survived when so many others had not. The 1920s brought profound changes to America, and even rural Arizona was not immune. The ranch acquired its first automobile in 1921, though Cole insisted on keeping horses as well, claiming no mechanical contraption could replace a good horse. They got electricity in 1923, and Tessa marveled at the convenience of electric lights and the newfangled refrigerator that Mary Donnelly had recommended. Daniel graduated from law school in 1921 and passed the bar in California. To everyone's surprise and delight, he decided to return to Arizona to practice, opening a law office in Phoenix. He specialized in water rights and land law, using his knowledge to help ranchers and farmers navigate the increasingly complex legal landscape. Thomas took over more of the day-to-day ranch operations as Cole began to slow down a bit in his 60s. Father and son worked beautifully together, with Thomas's energy and innovation complementing Cole's experience and wisdom. The ranch continued to thrive under their joint leadership. Catherine and James's medical practice grew as Florence and the surrounding area expanded. They were pillars of the community, known for their generosity and skill. Catherine continued to teach part-time, unable to give up her love of working with children. By 1925, Cole and Tessa had 12 grandchildren and were beginning to see great-grandchildren arrive. Little William Thomas, now 23, married his longtime sweetheart and promptly started a family of his own. The generational cycle continued, and Cole and Tessa marveled at how their family had grown from just the two of them plus young Samuel to this sprawling clan. On their 44th wedding anniversary, in December of 1925, their children threw them a surprise party. The main house was packed with 3 generations of family, along with friends from the community. There was an enormous cake, champagne for toasting, and a constant stream of people wanting to congratulate the couple who had built such an impressive legacy. Samuel stood to give a toast, his voice strong despite his 58 years. "I was 12 years old when my sister met Cole Quinn," he began. "We were struggling to survive after Pa died, and Tessa was doing everything she could to keep us fed and housed. I remember the day she came home and told me about a cowboy who wanted her to fish his creek instead of the river. I was suspicious at first, worried this stranger might hurt my sister. But Cole proved himself to be everything Tessa needed: a partner, a protector, a provider, and most importantly, a man who loved her with everything he had." Samuel raised his glass. "In 44 years, I've watched them build not just a ranch, but a family empire built on love and respect. They've shown all of us what a true partnership looks like, what real love endures through." To Cole and Tessa Quinn, the best sister and brother-in-law a man could ask for, may they have many more years together. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Cole pulled Tessa close and kissed her in front of everyone, making their grandchildren giggle and their children smile. When Cole finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. "I've been blessed beyond measure," he said simply. "44 years ago, I took the biggest risk of my life and approached a beautiful woman working by a river. I offered her access to better fishing, but she gave me so much more. She gave me a home, a family, and a love that has sustained me through every challenge and made every joy sweeter. Tessa Quinn, you are my heart. You always have been, and you always will be." There was not a dry eye in the house by the time he finished. Tessa was crying openly, happy tears that Cole gently wiped away before kissing her again. The party continued long into the night, with music and dancing and storytelling. Young children eventually fell asleep in various corners while the adults continued to celebrate. It was a testament to what Cole and Tessa had built, not just the physical ranch and house, but the bonds of family and love that held them all together. As the 1920s turned into the 1930s, the nation plunged into the Great Depression. The Quinn Ranch, like everyone else, felt the impact of the economic crisis. Beef prices plummeted, making it harder to turn a profit. Some of their workers had to be let go, though Cole and Thomas made sure everyone received fair severance and references. But the ranch's diversification into fishing and their conservative financial practices helped them weather the storm better than many. They had savings put aside from the good years, and the fishing business actually increased as people looked for less expensive protein sources. Tessa's fresh trout became a staple for families trying to stretch their food budgets. The family pulled together during the hard years, with everyone contributing what they could. Catherine and James often treated patients who could not pay, accepting payment in goods or services. Daniel did legal work pro bono for families facing foreclosure. Thomas and Samuel worked dawn to dusk, keeping the ranch running with a smaller crew. And Cole and Tessa, now in their 70s, continued to provide the steady leadership and moral center that held everything together. They opened their home to family members who were struggling, never turned away anyone who needed a meal, and remained optimistic that better days would come. Those better days did eventually arrive as the Depression eased in the late 1930s. The ranch gradually recovered, rehiring workers and rebuilding their herds. By 1939, they were nearly back to their pre-Depression prosperity. The Second World War brought a fresh wave of challenges and changes. Several of the Quinn grandchildren enlisted, including 3 of Thomas's children and 2 of Samuel's grandchildren. Once again, the family lived with the anxiety of having loved ones in danger overseas. Cole and Tessa, now in their 80s, spent much of the war years writing letters to their grandchildren serving abroad, sending care packages, and praying for their safe return. When news would come of another soldier from the area being killed, they would hold each other and thank God it was not one of their own, while feeling guilty for that gratitude. By God's grace, all the Quinn family members who served in the war returned home safely, though some bore scars both visible and invisible from their service. The family rallied around them, helping them readjust to civilian life and providing the support and love they needed to heal. In 1945, as the war ended and the nation celebrated, Cole and Tessa celebrated their own milestone, 64 years together. They were 87 and 85 respectively, still living in their home beside the Double Creek, still holding hands on their porch every evening. Their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren filled the ranch for a massive celebration. 4 generations of Quinns gathered to honor the patriarch and matriarch, whose love had started everything. There was food and music and laughter, stories told and retold about the early days, and countless expressions of love and gratitude. Cole could barely speak when it came time to say a few words, overwhelmed by the sight of his vast family gathered together. "Look at what we built," he finally managed, his voice quavering with age and emotion. "Look at what love can create." Tessa squeezed his hand, her own eyes misty. "We are so blessed," she said softly. "Every moment, every struggle, every joy, it was all worth it to be standing here today surrounded by this family we love so much." As the celebration continued around them, Cole and Tessa slipped away to their favorite spot by the creek. They moved slowly now, Cole with a cane and Tessa with careful steps, but they still made the journey together as they had for over 6 decades. They stood hand in hand at the water's edge, listening to the familiar sound of the creek flowing past. The cottonwood trees were enormous now, providing deep shade. The water still ran clear and cold, still held plenty of trout. Some things, the best things, never changed. "You remember?" Cole asked softly. "That first day. Every detail," Tessa assured him. "You rode up on Bess, touched your hat brim, and said good morning. I thought you were just another cowboy who might cause me trouble. I had no idea you were my destiny." "Fish my stream instead," Cole quoted with a smile. "The best 5 words I ever spoke." "They changed my life," Tessa said. "They changed everything." "They changed both our lives," Cole corrected gently. "We changed each other, Tessa. We made each other better, stronger, happier. That's what real love does." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching the water flow, listening to the laughter of their family in the distance. The sun was beginning to set, painting the Arizona sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink and purple. It was breathtakingly beautiful as every sunset they had watched together for 64 years. "I love you," Tessa said quietly. "I have loved you since I was 22 years old, and you were 26, standing by the Salt River offering me a chance at something better. I'll love you beyond my last breath and into whatever comes after." "And I love you," Cole replied, his voice steady despite his age. "You took a scared cowboy and turned him into a husband, a father, a grandfather, and made him happier than he ever dreamed possible." You are my everything, Tessa Quinn. You always have been." They kissed softly, a gentle press of lips that held 64 years of love, passion, partnership, and devotion. When they parted, both were smiling, their eyes bright with happy tears. Hand in hand, they walked slowly back toward the house where their family waited. The porch light was on, warm and welcoming. Through the windows they could see people moving, talking, laughing. Their legacy, their living legacy, created not from land or money but from love. Cole and Tessa Quinn had built an empire, but not one of cattle or property or wealth, though they had all those things. They had built an empire of love, family, and enduring partnership. They had taken a chance by an Arizona river in the summer of 1881, and that chance had blossomed into something extraordinary. As they climbed the porch steps together, supporting each other as they always had, and stepped into the warmth and light and love that filled their home, they knew they had lived a good life. The best life. A life built on a simple proposition beside a river, transformed through hard work, devotion, and abiding love into something magnificent. The creek still flowed. The family still gathered. And Cole and Tessa Quinn still loved each other with the same fierce devotion that had sparked into being all those years ago when a cowboy saw a fisherwoman mending nets and took a chance on destiny. They had been blessed, and they knew it. And they were grateful, every single day, for the journey they had taken together.